Moccia, a small island off the coast of Sicily, 100 miles north of Carthage, is the site of another Phoenician Tophet. It could hold the key to the question of whether or not child sacrifice was actually practiced by the Phoenicians. Earlier this summer, Glenn Marco and a group of leading scientists headed off to Moccia to try and resolve the issue once and for all. In Phoenician times, Moccia was a city teeming with over 15,000 people. But in 397 BC, it was destroyed after an extended siege. The inhabitants were massacred and the buildings left to rot. This disaster is a huge benefit for the team. Moccia was never fully reoccupied, and so the site is not cluttered with the debris of subsequent civilizations.
This site is significant, first of all, because in contrast to all of the other cities that the Phoenicians occupied, which were always in such amazing locations that they were built upon by the Romans and peoples after them. Because of the remarkable condition of the site, we have a number of complexes that are completely preserved. One of them is the Tophet.
Like the Tophet in Carthage, archaeologists discovered a large walled precinct in Moccia. They excavated 6,000 clay urns, once again filled with charred bones. The thousands of urns discovered on the island are now in storerooms under lock and key. The hope is that by investigating their contents, the scientists will reveal the secrets of the Tophet. Dr. Charlotte Roberts is a biological anthropologist. She hopes to discover remains that are sufficiently well preserved to indicate whether the children were healthy or diseased. If they're diseased, then it's likely the Tophets are ordinary cemeteries for children who died from natural causes. But if they're healthy, then perhaps they died in some unnatural way, possibly in a sacrificial rite. A normal skeleton would make her task relatively easy, but these remains were cremated 3,000 years ago.
Here we've got one cremated individual, we assume. And if I just gradually tip this out on the table, you can probably understand the problems I'm faced with when it comes to doing an analysis of this sort of material. The first thing is it's really fragmented, and there are lots and lots of fragments.
Charlotte's first task is to confirm that the bones are indeed from infants.
Here we've got what looks like a rib from a baby. And here I think we've got part of the mandible, the lower jaw. Here, yes, this looks like part of the skull, something called the petrous part of the temporal bone. These are the ones that survive quite well in cremation.
As Charlotte picks through the bones, she makes an unexpected discovery.
Here's a bit of pelvis, which I think is from a sheep or a goat. Here's another animal bone, again probably from a sheep or goat. And this big chunk is also animal bone. And there are different ways of identifying human from non-human. The outer layer of the bone here, which is called the cortex, tends to be more dense and often thicker than a human bone.
Many of the Carthage urns excavated back in the 1970s also contained a mixture of animal, bird and human bones. But why? The evidence can be interpreted in totally different ways. There's no dispute that the Phoenicians sacrificed animals in the Tophet. So one theory is that the animals and children were sacrificed at the same ceremonies. The result was that their cremated remains got mixed up on the funeral pyre and therefore in the urns.
Sometimes we get bits of the animal or bits of the human together in the same jar, and it's unlikely that this is an intentional interment in the jar. but just an accident of scraping off the pyre.
But for other academics, it's no accident. They believed the Phoenicians deliberately sacrificed birds and animals when they cremated newborn babies who had died of natural causes.
Inside the urns, mixed up with the children's bones, we also find the bones of small animals which were sacrificed during the cremation ceremony. The sacrifice of these small birds or lambs was meant to accompany the child to the other side, to the next life.
This might explain the urns with mixed remains, but many of the Carthage urns only contained animal bones.
In some of these jars, for example, in this one, there wasn't a baby in there at all, only a lamb. So my question to those who claim that this is just an infant cemetery, that is only for children who died of natural causes, why in the world then are they burying their pets?
The archaeological debate goes on, but back in Motia, there's been a breakthrough that may help solve the mystery. Charlotte Roberts has found human teeth, an important indicator of general health. If they show signs of disease, then the children could have died from natural causes and not in a sacrificial rite.
The teeth survive very well during burial, much better than the bones, so we do get quite a lot of evidence for dental disease. What we term metabolic diseases, so disorders of normal metabolism, things like anemia, rickets, vitamin D deficiency, scurvy, vitamin C deficiency.
Metabolic disorders could affect dental development, so Charlotte uses the microscope to look for defects in the enamel. After careful scrutiny, she's prepared to reach some conclusions.
On the basis of what I've seen, there's no dental defects in these teeth from these individuals, suggesting that they didn't suffer any disease or nutritional problems.
In all, Charlotte looked at the remains of over 20 children. She found nothing to suggest they died of disease. And there's one piece of archaeological evidence which supports the theory that the children in the Tophet were healthy when they met their death. It's an engraving on one of the standing stones found above the urns.
There's a very evocative image that actually shows a priest cradling a young infant in his arms. It's very clear that the child is alive. He's being held upright and cradled in the arm, and I think this is the process that happens before the immolation of the child, before the cutting of the throat and the actual sacrifice.
Glenn Marco believes the Phoenician wall surrounding Motia provides further important archaeological evidence of the special status of the Tophet. His argument is that in Phoenician times, Motia was connected to Sicily by a road. Although the road is underwater now, the lighter blue color of the lagoon reveals its position. This road made Motia vulnerable to attack from the mainland. In the 6th century BC, this defensive wall was hastily constructed around the island when the Greeks declared war.
Now the wall itself, because it hugs the contour of the island, cut across the cemetery which lies to our west. And that wall literally bisects the cemetery itself.
To save time, the wall's builders took the easiest route, even though it meant cutting across the cemetery. However, when they came to the Tophet, they took the trouble to build around it. Why?
The implication of this, of course, is that this was a very sacred, hallowed ground. What we have is not a cemetery for children that died from natural causes, but a very sacred precinct of ritual child sacrifice.
Glenn Marco may be right, but he admits that only unambiguous scientific evidence will prove conclusively his belief that ritual child sacrifice actually happened.
I think the evidence that would really settle this debate over child sacrifice versus natural burial would be the evidence of the age of the children cremated.
The age of the children when they died is critical because Professor Bartoloni maintains that the Tophet is simply a special cemetery for infants who died from natural causes.
Nella realtà, il Tophet che cos'è?
So, the Tophet, what is it? It's an open-air space where Phoenician children, either stillborn or who died soon after birth, were buried.
So how old are the children buried in the Tophet? Were most of them stillborn or newborns who died in the first critical weeks of life? The answers could lie in the teeth that Charlotte Roberts is examining.
We know in modern populations how the teeth develop, when each teeth starts to develop, when it comes through the gums and shows in the mouth, and then we compare what we see in our archaeological teeth with the modern data.
Even 3,000-year-old teeth can give evidence of the children's age at the time of death.
Well, looking at these teeth down the microscope, we've got two people here, and on the basis of the teeth, they're 2 to 3 months of age when they were cremated.
None of the 20 children examined by Charlotte were stillborn or newborn. All the teeth were from infants aged between 2 or 3 months. And even more compelling evidence about the age of the children has been found in Israel. The Hebrew University in Jerusalem has a team analysing the teeth found in Carthage. Once again, the aim is to find out the age of the babies in the urns. Last month, the preliminary results on 20 tooth samples known as tooth germs came through. So far, none of the babies were stillborn.
And here, this is the germ. It's the first baby molar, the first deciduous molar, and this is the crown, only about half formed. This suggests that this infant was aged 1 to 2 months when it died.
Other children found at Carthage were much older.
And if I take out this tooth germ, this is the tooth germ of a first permanent molar, and here you can see that the crown is about 2/3 formed. That indicates that this child was about 2 years old when he died or was sacrificed. We have so far only looked at a small sample of the remains from Carthage, but we have found some infants that were as old as 5 years.
None of the 40 children examined from both the Carthage and Mocha Tophets were stillborn. Their ages ranged from 2 or 3 months to 2 years, and one was about 5. These results undermine Professor Bartoloni's theory that the Tophet was a special cemetery for stillborns or babies who died shortly after birth. It seems that the Phoenicians probably did sacrifice their children to appease their gods. There's one further forensic test which could settle the debate once and for all: DNA analysis. But will it be possible? DNA has never been successfully extracted from the cremated remains of children who died 3,000 years ago.